A catastrophic intelligence misjudgment once occurred on the Allied transport routes in the Arctic Ocean. This event is even regarded as one of the biggest miscalculations of the war. In the summer of 1942, the Soviet battlefield on the Eastern Front became the key to turning the tide of World War II. To ensure the continuous influx of war materials, the Allied forces were forced to launch large-scale operations on the crisis-ridden Arctic Ocean route. The code name for this transport mission was PQ-17, and it consisted of a formation of 34 cargo ships sailing from Iceland to the Soviet Union. The British Air Force and Navy were responsible for the escort mission. On the fourth day of the voyage, the calm was suddenly broken as the formation received a signal that a German submarine had been spotted. Captain Skar of the Norwegian cargo ship No. 6, the Nordhort, immediately ordered 2 Dutch sailors to man the Oerlikon 20mm anti-aircraft gun for combat readiness. However, just then a merchant ship full of tanks suddenly exploded and billowed thick smoke. First, Mate Merck on the bridge saw this and immediately ordered a hard right rudder to avoid the sinking cargo ship directly ahead. At the same time, the radio operator Ragnhild received a warning that a submarine had appeared on the starboard side. The 2 gunners were tense as they quickly turned their muzzles to search for the target. By the 5th day of the voyage, Ragnhild confirmed that ship number 34 of the fleet had been sunk yesterday, and ship number 21 had returned to Iceland today due to engine failure. Ragnhild's next message made Skar feel uneasy. Yesterday, there were supposed to be 5 British bombers escorting the formation, but 4 of them were shot down by the Germans on the way. Even worse was that the engine of the Nordhort was also leaking oil seriously due to a piston ring seal failure and could only maintain half speed. Eric pessimistically told Skar that to fix it, they would have to stop the ship for half a day. However, at present, stopping for half a day meant death. By the 7th day, although there were still Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers circling in the air and more than 10 escort warships accompanying them on the sea surface, the Nordhort had gradually fallen to the very end of the formation due to engine failure and was in a precarious position. However, the true darkest moment for the entire fleet had just arrived. A coded radio order from the British mainland spread to every ship like a thunderclap. When Skar saw the message, his pupils tightened sharply, and he immediately gathered Merck and Eric to discuss how to respond.
To disperse and proceed to Russian ports. Hva skal vi gå en og en? Eskorten blir trukket tilbake.
You must understand that Germany's powerful naval and air forces had been cruising in this sea of death like vultures. They guessed that the British might be urgently mobilizing their main ships to deal with other threats, or perhaps they assessed that the escort forces were too disparate to completely resist the German hunting party and chose to abandon the escort mission out of despair. The dissolution of the formation was a foregone conclusion. They immediately planned a route, but the final result was that no matter which route they took, they were within the combat radius of the German airbase located in Norway. The chances of survival were slim. Eric's voice trembled as he strongly suggested that Skar use the engine failure as a legitimate reason to return to Iceland immediately and end this suicidal voyage. Merck immediately seconded the proposal, pointing out with great concern that once the engine was completely scrapped, even their retreat would be cut off. Moreover, the only self-defense firepower on the entire cargo ship was a small 20mm anti-aircraft gun, which was useless in front of the German wolves. However, Skar flatly rejected their proposal. He believed that during war, everyone has a mission, and transporting supplies forward by overcoming difficulties is the only way to end this war sooner. After issuing the order to maintain course, he also instructed that the news must not be leaked.
Sprer de lasteskipene.
Eskorten følger oss med både fly og kryssere. Det blir større avstander, så jeg vil være på den sikre siden. Ja.
Meanwhile, out on the sea, all the surviving cargo ships followed the order. Like a scattered flock of sheep, each of them struggled to adjust their course and sailed alone toward the vast, desolate coastal waters. On the deck, the boatswain Lars and the crew looked at each other filled with doubt and fear. The cruel consequences of disbanding the formation were immediate. Just one day later, The radio channel was filled with desperate distress signals. In this short period of time, 4 cargo ships sank one after another into the cold seabed.
Det ble en omvei hvis vi skal til Murmansk. Behold kurs og fart. Purr meg om det er noe.
Continuing the voyage, Merck suddenly discovered a capsized cruise ship in the mist on the port side and could vaguely see several desperate crew members waving for help on the hull. Merck immediately ordered the sailors to lower the lifeboat and approach the cruise ship to carry out a rescue. However, Skar, who rushed to the bridge, coldly stopped the rescue, claiming that ships in the group were strictly forbidden to stop, and he immediately turned the rudder back. This made Merck unable to understand Skar's refusal to save them, especially since the formation had clearly already been disbanded, so the rule about not stopping within the formation did not exist. Just then, the cruise ship suddenly experienced a violent explosion. Obviously, the Germans had placed a large number of mines around the cruise ship after hitting it trying to detonate any ships that came to the rescue. The huge waves stirred up by the explosion pushed several pitch-black mines toward the hull of the Nordhort. Seeing this, Skar immediately ordered Erik to stop the engine completely. Soon the 2 youngest sailors were called to the deck. Everyone immediately put life jackets on them and tied ropes around their waists. In the biting cold wind by the ship's rail, their task was to use long poles to push away those floating reapers. The gunner Johan reminded them that as long as they did not touch the horns of the mines, they could avoid an explosion. Because the first sailor, Sigurd, failed to adjust the angle of the long pole properly, he stumbled in panic while pushing the first mine and fell into the water. At the critical moment, Isaksen agilely used his long pole to firmly press against the mine and pushed it away with all his might. Immediately afterwards, a second mine drifted toward the side of the ship, and Isaksen dealt with it calmly and pushed it away smoothly. However, at this moment, an accident occurred, and the rope tied to the ship suddenly came loose, causing Isaksen to fall instantly into the bone-chilling Arctic Ocean. There was no texture to grab on the smooth and cold ship wall, and Isaksen struggled in vain in the water as the ruthless current instantly swept him toward the stern. Lars threw down a lifeline in horror, but it was too late, as Isaksen had been rapidly washed away from the hull. Since the ship was surrounded by mines and unable to lower a lifeboat for rescue, the crew on deck could only watch helplessly as Isaksen disappeared into the dark waves. After a brief silence on the bridge, Skar immediately ordered Erik to start the engine and sail out of the minefield.
Neste gang du vil tynne ut I rekkene, så kan du se det I øya, så kan du velge det ut selv.
Jeg redda skip og lasten av det vi har gjort.
Han gjorde det. Han var guttunge.
Min jobb å gjøre ubehagelige prioriteringer, og din var ikke å styre oss rett inn I et minefelt.
In the engine room, Skar brought food for Erik. But Erik, who knew the inside story, had clearly fallen into endless panic. He had had enough of the dark days in the engine room and enough of the sailing life where he could lose his life at any time. With a trembling voice, he asked Skar to allow him to retire due to illness after docking. Skar agreed to Erik's request on the condition that Erik must repair the engine as soon as possible. On the other side, Lars accidentally discovered the telegrams about the British disbanding the fleet and the distress calls from numerous cargo ships while sealing Isaksen's belongings. Panic immediately spread through the entire freighter like a plague. After learning of this, Skar immediately took a pistol from the safe and rushed to the crew lounge. To appease the panicked crew, he claimed that as long as the freighter sailed at full speed, the German submarines would not catch up. He also encouraged everyone with great passion not to be afraid of death because the purpose of transporting goods to the Soviet Union was to defeat the German Nazis sooner, and if the people present did not do this job, someone else would have to take their place. Skar's impassioned and righteous speech indeed caused the despair in the eyes of some crew members to be temporarily replaced by a sense of tragic heroism. However, more people clearly saw the silent threat conveyed by the cold pistol at his waist. By the 9th day of the voyage, the cold statistics were heartbreaking. Of the 34 cargo ships that set out, 18 had forever sunk into the abyss of the Arctic Ocean. Just not far from the Nordhort, cargo ship number 23 had just been hit by a bomb, and a huge column of smoke was still rolling and rising over the sea. Faced with such a grim situation, Skar remained unmoved and stubbornly insisted on the original course to the Soviet Union. Merck became anxious instantly, and he loudly and almost uncontrollably accused Skar of using the lives of all the crew members as the price to realize his own tragic ambition. Skar unceremoniously retorted that Merck was a coward, accusing Mørk of complaining about every misfortune since the beginning of the voyage, and strongly reiterated once again that only by reaching the destination could more lives be saved. Just as this fierce quarrel had not yet subsided, the lookout suddenly sounded the alarm as 2 German Ju-88 medium bombers were hovering over the nearby waters like ghosts. Skar quickly pressed the alarm bell. Mørk said nothing further and immediately rushed out of the bridge, screaming orders for all non-combat personnel to leave the deck immediately to avoid the incoming air raid. The 2 Dutch gunners were racing against time to load ammunition for the 20mm anti-aircraft gun. However, one of the bombers had already turned its nose and was diving aggressively straight toward the Nordhort.
Full maskin forover! Faen ikke med. Full maskin forover! Ikke på kjellen!
Just as the second bomber entered a fierce diving attack posture, Mørk suddenly realized that Evensen, who was leaning on the deck, had been frozen with fear. He rushed out of the cabin, disregarding his own safety, trying to drag Evensen back to a safe zone. However, the German strafing had already begun, and the dense machine gun bullets whistled like the scythe of death, instantly tearing the cargo on the deck into fragments. As the bomber flew away, Mørk painfully discovered that Evensen had been hit and killed. Almost simultaneously, Lars, who was well prepared, decisively led the sailors out of the cabin to use water hoses to fight the fires that had started on the ship. When Mørk rushed back to the bridge in a hurry, the scene before him made his heart sink as Skar had fallen in a pool of blood, having been hit in the abdomen by flying glass fragments. Mørk quickly ordered personnel to carry Skar down for treatment and resolutely took over command himself. At this moment, the bomber whistled and dived again. Mørk calmly commanded the helmsman to adjust the course, and he firmly kept the ship facing the enemy plane to create the best shooting angle for the anti-aircraft gun. Johan showed the excellent battlefield speed of a veteran, facing the bullets whizzing past him without fear, his eyes always locked dead on the crosshairs in the sight. With everyone resisting desperately, the 2 bombers were finally shot down one after another, and the Nordhort temporarily won a precious respite. In the captain's quarters, Ragnhild removed the glass fragments for Skar and bandaged the wound. After an injection of morphine, Skar fell into a coma. Just then, a bold and even dangerous idea grew wildly in Mørk's mind.
Så lenge han bevisstløs, det jeg som kan ta avgjørelsen.
Hva du mener du?
Vi kan redde hele mannskapen. Vi kan dra tilbake til Island.
Vet at du kommer til å bli arrestert, forstår du det?
Jeg tar hele ansvaret her selv.
Det her går ikke jeg med på.
Seeing that Ragnhild resolutely opposed his plan, Mørk had to sternly scold her to leave. He tried to persuade Lars to support turning back, but was also rejected. Faced with their opposition, Mørk's determination to return became even stronger and even twisted. He frantically dug out the morphine from the medical kit, his expressionless face and stiff movements drawing the liquid medicine with a syringe. Driven by a loss of reason, Mørk finally injected another dose into the comatose Skar. Before leaving, he quickly took the pistol from Skar's coat. After a brief hesitation, he locked the gun in the safe in Skar's room and took only the keys to the safe and the cabin door. He thought the road to return was open, but fate played a cruel joke again. The cargo ship's engine had accelerated its damage during the attack just now, due to running at full speed for too long. Currently, the freighter could only sail at slow speed, and perhaps could only maintain it for a few dozen miles. If the freighter could be stopped completely for half a day, Erik was fully confident he could fix it. When Ragnhild asked Mørk for the next move, Mørk had no ideas at this time, and he was so panicked he was incoherent and dared not look up to face Ragnhild, who was waiting for the next instruction. Just when Mørk felt ashamed and his eyes swept blankly across the edge of the Arctic Ocean route map, a flash of inspiration suddenly appeared. He eagerly dug out a more complete and detailed Arctic nautical chart and quickly locked his eyes on a remote small island that had been omitted from the standard route map. He immediately rushed to the bridge and ordered Eric to try his best to keep the engine running while instructing the helmsman to turn and sail firmly toward that unknown island. On the 11th day of the voyage, Merck told the crew his thoughts. The target island was outside the combat radius of German warplanes, and the thick floating ice around the island could prevent German submarines from surfacing to attack, so anchoring there for half a day could win vital repair time for Eric, making it possible for the freighter to complete the subsequent voyage. On the 12th day, the Nordhort, moving extremely slowly, finally arrived near the island. Merck injected morphine into Skar again to maintain his comatose state. The freighter struggled to crash through the heavy ice layer to get as close to the island as possible and finally anchored completely. Eric immediately started emergency repairs. On the deck, the biting cold had frozen the only anti-aircraft gun solid, rendering it completely useless. They could only pray that no German planes would appear. Merck's island plan made Ragnhild look at him with new respect. She also optimistically stated that after the engine was fixed, they could enter the cover of the Soviet Air Force by crossing the northernmost cape. But Merck, who had experienced World War I, scoffed at this. It turned out that Merck had a painful past as he had participated in the Battle of Jutland as a captain. After his warship sank, he and 15 officers and soldiers were lucky enough to climb onto a lifeboat. At that time, they were very close to Murmansk in the Soviet Union, and they rowed toward it with hope. However, when there were only 5 people left on the boat, 3 Soviet merchant ships close at hand ignored them and sailed past coldly. Therefore, deep down, Merck never held the sense of mission to transport supplies to the Soviet Union, like Skar did, and his only belief was to do his best to protect the safety of everyone on the ship. Time moved to the 13th day, and Merck froze in place instantly when he entered the captain's cabin. The bed was empty, and a wave of panic surged through him, so he immediately began searching the ship like a madman. Just as Merck rushed into the cargo hold, the sight before him made him gasp, for Skar was sitting on a wooden crate, holding a Lee Enfield Mk1 rifle and staring at him coldly. Merck forced himself to be calm and greeted him, but Skar coldly questioned the whereabouts of the pistol. Merck hurriedly explained that the gun was in the safe and immediately threw the key over. After Merck eagerly explained the reason for stopping at the island, Skar slowly let down his guard. Just at this moment, Ragnhild rushed in panic to report that a German patrol plane had appeared in the sky. They rushed to the bridge to check. Fortunately, the enemy plane did not seem to have discovered the freighter hidden in the floating ice yet. But the anti-aircraft gun was frozen, and once the freighter was exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. After a suffocating moment of silence, Skar suddenly remembered that in the cargo hold there were still 3 Bofors 40mm anti-aircraft guns, which were prepared to be shipped to the Soviet Union. But the problem was that without a crane they could not be moved to the deck at all, and could only be set up at the cargo hatch. It was urgent, so all crew members immediately started to dismantle the thick wooden boards of the hatch door to open up a firing position. Meanwhile, Merck on the bridge suddenly thought of a way not to be easily discovered by German planes.
Vi har hvitmaling i lasten. Kan vi bruke det på skoget? Hvis vi går i ett med isen, så kan det være vanskeligere å oppdage oss. Ja, hvis det er det du trenger for å roe nervene, så gjerne for meg.
After obtaining approval, a camouflage operation racing against time began. The crew worked nervously in the narrow hatchway to mount the heavy Bofors gun while racing against time to splash white paint across the hull. After everything was ready, the German plane indeed flew over the island's airspace again. After circling a few times in the sky, the enemy plane suddenly turned and flew straight toward the freighter.
Vi kommer fra sørøst! Det må snu kanonen ca. 30 grader babord!
Sigurd!
Stopp!
At this time, a bold speculation flashed through Merck's mind that this German plane probably had not discovered them. Because logically, once a target is found, it should call for reinforcements instead of circling alone. And the sound of the plane's engine was unusually smooth, showing no signs of diving for a bombing run.
Jeg tror vi skal vente.
Luckily, Merck's judgment was completely correct as the white-painted cargo ship blended perfectly into the icy background, and the German plane flew away without noticing anything. Everyone let out a long sigh of relief. Skar returned to the captain's cabin silently. On the other side, Eric had completely repaired the engine, and the Nordhort could sail at full speed again. In the end, Skar officially handed over command to Merck on the grounds that he needed rest. The Nordhort then broke out of the ice and sailed at full speed toward the Soviet Union. The PQ-17 transport operation dispatched a total of 34 cargo ships, but only 9 arrived safely in the Soviet Union while all others were sunk by the Germans. The cause of the disaster was that Britain received intelligence that the most powerful German fleet, including the battleship Tirpitz, was coming to intercept the PQ-17 operation. The British military believed that the long-range cover force of PQ-17 was insufficient to confront the main fleet of the German Navy, so they ultimately chose to sacrifice the pawns to save the knights, and withdrew the escort warships. But the result proved that this was false intelligence, and the German fleet never left the Norwegian port. The decision to disband the convoy is regarded as one of the biggest misjudgments of the war.